Good morning and welcome. Those of us of a certain age will remember a great song by Cat Stevens, which was actually a hymn written in the early 1930s. Please sing along.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Good morning. Welcome to the August 30th Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg, a congregation for the spiritual growth and well-being of all souls. We'll start with our chalice lighting, our covenant, and our invocation.
Hi everybody. Good to be with you again on this Sunday morning. I have my Sunday go-to-meeting mask on, which I always wear, and I hope you do too, because it really does make a difference. Let us now light our chalice as a symbol of our shared communion and our search for truth. Join, if you will, in the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our invocation this morning is adapted from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, from chapter 5. We are the light of the world. May our light shine for others as does the grace of God. May we care for our neighbors and our enemies and our persecutors, for we are all children of the source of all, whose sun shines on the bad and on the good alike, and whose rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous. So may we be perfect, as the Spirit of life is perfect.
I have a story now for children, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. It's about a family who went to the beach one summer week. They got a great big house because they had a huge family, members of the family of all ages. And they were having just a great time, each in their own way. They loved cookouts and they loved swimming. And one evening they decided to go down to the shore and watch the sunset. And while they were there, watching the sunset, the great-grandmother asked one of the little girls, an 8-year-old girl, she said, "Sunshine," she called her Sunshine, "what are you going to be when you grow up? And Sunshine said that she wasn't sure yet, she hadn't decided, but maybe a dancer or a singer, or maybe a lawyer like her mom, or an engineer like her dad. And she'd have to wait and see. And then Sunshine's younger brother Lucas declared, when I'm grown up, I'm going to drive a great big dump truck. And then his little sister, whom the great-grandmother always called Spot, I don't know why she called her Spot, but she called her Spot, just 4 years old, looked very closely at the great-grandmother, and then at her grandmother, and then at her mother, and at her grandfather and her dad, and she said to her mom, "Mommy, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And everybody laughed, and her mom laughed, and she said, "Well, sweetie, I'm already grown up." And Spot looked around at her grandmother and her grandfather and her great-grandmother, and she said, after looking at them very deliberately, she said, "What about them, Mommy? Did they stop growing?" Now, I'd like you to think about what would the mom have answered her little girl? Now, John with our offering and offertory.
To keep us thriving as a congregation, may we remember our connection to one another. And let us not forget our offerings to support the means to those connections. As you listen to the brief offering music, please click on the eye in the upper right corner of your screen to make a contribution. You can also donate by the Give Plus app, or on our webpage under the Giving tab, or by sending a check to the church office. Many thanks.
We have two readings this morning. The first is from the Covenant of the Unitarian Universalist Congregations. We will strive to grow in affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We will strive to grow in affirming and promoting justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We will strive to grow in affirming and promoting acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We will strive to grow in affirming and promoting a free and responsible search for truth and for meaning. We will strive to grow in affirming and promoting the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. We will strive to grow in affirming and promoting the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We will strive to grow in affirming and promoting respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. May this be our work and our fulfillment. Now, John with an interlude.
Let's continue our service by singing, "There's a River Flowing in My Soul."
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart.
Our second reading includes selections from Greta Thunberg's speeches to the French National Assembly on July 23, 2019, and to the United Nations General Assembly on September 23, 2019, just about a year ago. To these assemblies, the 16-year-old protester said, "This is all wrong. I shouldn't be standing here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. And yet you all come to us young children, young people for hope? How dare you? You have taken away my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I am one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction. And all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you are doing enough, when the politics and the solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? Or maybe you are simply not mature enough to tell it like it is, because even that burden you leave to us children. Your generation is failing us. But the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say, we will never forgive you."
As a high school senior, when I presented my art class project, the art teacher looked at it and seemed to get upset and angry. My project was my painting of a smiling human figure, half fleshed, half skeleton, dancing amidst flames, a bony finger pointing up at a golden stairway to a doorway of light. I titled the painting Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso. Was it the stages of life or afterlife? I didn't know. Had I been reading Dante's Divine Comedy in English class? I don't remember. Was this partially formed human pointing the way to or the loss of heaven? Was my subconscious messaging my school study that was comparing the terrorizing of the Red Scare trials of the 1950s with the Salem witch trials of the 1600s? What influences the dancing mind of a boy almost old enough to choose and to vote? Myself, I felt I'd done something true and good and brave with my painting, to quote my writing hero, Ernest Hemingway. If I had read Joseph Campbell by that time, I might have called the painting mythic, the human story in a skull shell. I liked it. The art teacher did not. So it goes. Were there upsetting questions in it, like, what are you doing here? What have you done so far? What are you going to do? What are you here to do? So it goes. One of my favorite novels, James Morrow's This Is the Way the World Ends, says humans haven't yet found out who we are or what we are here to do. In the core story in the novel, American and Soviet political military leaders miscalculate nuclear strategies and escalate to an all-out war, destroying all human life with the exception of 6 American men 4 of whom are national defense strategists. One is a famous end times preacher, and one a small town Vermont gravestone engraver. All 6 are on trial for crimes against humanity leading to extinction. The first 5 directly charged, the gravestone engraver charged through complicity. The tribunal judges and the billions of spectators at the trial are the spirits of people who would have lived if not for extinction. Each is aware of the wonders their lives would otherwise have offered to themselves or the world. They call themselves the unadmitted. Of interest to us this morning, in the midst of our own intimations of apocalypse, is the gravestone engraver. One reason is because he was entrapped to appear to be complicit in the military, industrial, political, religious complexes' willingness to put the human species at risk. A second reason is because he was a traditional, small-town New England Unitarian. His name was George Paxton. Lest you get anxious about injustice to a fellow Unitarian, let me note 2 things. First, though the tribunal judges sentenced George to death for crimes against the future, they like him and regret that they must execute him. Second, the unadmitted people of the future who knew of George's actual life and his character and his entrapment arrange for his escape, and he is not executed. I wonder if any of us Unitarians can recognize ourselves in George. Born in the middle of the 20th century to generous and loving parents, old New England Unitarian stock, rejecting miracles, worshiping reason, denying the divinity of Jesus, holding serious doubts about the divinity of God. Around Halloween, an old woman of ghostly aspect visits George. As a Unitarian, he does not believe in ghosts. So he chats with her trustfully, naive skeptic that he is. She seems to want an epitaph for her parents that was never written. What had he inscribed on his parents' gravestone? Nothing, he says. Names and dates. I'm a Unitarian. But she says, what should the gravestones say for your mother? I don't know, he says. She should have been happier. She had diabetes, but I think it was the high standards that killed her. I loved her very much. She was better than she knew. Perhaps that's her epitaph. And what epitaph for your father? Well, he was simpler than my mother, likely the most unselfish man on the earth. His job was pointless. He never found out what he was doing here. There's an epitaph. Later at the trial, the fundamentalist preacher asks George if he is saved. George says, I'm a Unitarian. The preacher says, I'll pray for you. George says, I appreciate it. And he did. He felt that as a Unitarian, he was not competent to deal with metaphysics, including apocalyptic biblical prophecies, which the fundamentalist preacher had an inclination to quote as if they were gospel. Instead, as a Unitarian, George approached prophecy not as inevitable fate, but as possible futures which one could make happen or avert through diligence and creativity. As a Unitarian, George did not stereotype, though he had always found Catholics frightening and vaguely extraterrestrial. He had always liked the Sermon on the Mount and thought Job had some memorable parts too. When one of the alleged war criminals heard that, he growled, "I thought you were a Unitarian." And then one of the unadmitted spirits said, "Unitarians don't hate. They don't hate Jews, they don't hate Muslims. They're proud of everybody." In the end, George is the last admitted human alive. Shortly before he dies and our species goes completely extinct, his old woman visitor returns. She is the last of the unadmitted. She reveals that she would have been his granddaughter if extinction had not prevented her birth. She shares how his beloved little daughter Holly, her would have been mother, would have grown up to be very good for the world, as would have Holly's husband if he had grown up. He had seemed a rather mean little boy before the nuclear holocaust, but he could have grown up. Many people don't, to their loss and to the world's. As his life's final professional act, George carves an epitaph for humankind into an Antarctic explorer's old memorial stone. He writes, "In loving memory of people, 4,500,000 BC to 1995 AD. They were better than they knew. They never found out what they were doing here." This telling of the way the world ends is framed beginning and end with separate chapters set in the year 1554. The great seer Nostradamus is pictured prophesying George's story to a local youth and explains that it is the nature of prophecy to speak in if-then terms. If our chosen actions are good, then the outcome will be good. If our chosen actions are bad, then the outcome will be bad. It's a matter of how we use the creative energy of our existence, which flows through the universe to all evolving forms according to their evolving nature, whether perceived by us as good or bad. As rain falls and sun shines on all beings, good or bad, how expansively we learn to use and offer this grace is the mark of how well we figure out what we're doing here. The learning stairs that we may ascend, too seldom intentionally climbed, are the same across cultures of time and space. Hindu stages of life, Chinese sequences to peace, African parables of journeying, Greek steps to immortality, Catholic sacramental moments of life, psychology's stages of development, Unitarian Universalist principles of potential, ascending from a sense of human worth to mutual caring with all dimensions of being in the world. These are what we have as descriptions of the truth, the way, and the life for which we are here. My art teacher seemed angered by my painting, but I think my skeletal dancer was singing, "Grow, human, climb and grow. Inferno, purgatorio, paradiso, you are better than you know. You are here to discover how wonderfully good you are and how you can be wonderfully more." Perhaps we will see. Thank you all. Joys and concerns. Each Sunday service, we take a few moments to share special joys or woes or concerns. We will share them here during the service if you send them to us, to Bill Motter or to me, or you can type them now into the YouTube comment column on the right of your screen. Take a few moments to type if you'd like. And as you type, I'll go on and share whatever announcements we have. And I thank you for your sharing and your caring. It's what makes us a community. For announcements, nothing special. The church activities continue online, and you can read about them in our newsletter, or you can go to our webpage and find out more about them. If the Unitarian Universalist tradition is new to you, you can find out more about us online at our website, UU St. Pete, that is stpete.org. We're happy to send you materials, and I'd be pleased to talk with you further anytime you'd like. Of course, we're still physical distancing and tracking the news for hopeful signs, and in the meantime doing everything we can to stay connected and to support one another. The church board is keeping an eye on when the experts say we can safely regather in person, as I know many of you are doing also. If you want to talk through something during this time of isolation, I am available by phone or email, and I can meet with you at the church, outdoors, on our portico, if you will call me to make a time. And don't forget, we can all just call one another on the phone or send special email messages. Lastly, I'd just like to say thanks to those who have contributed to today's service in word and song and production. Allison, John, and James. And thanks to you for your presence this morning.
Annie.
And perhaps, hopefully Annie is also singing for us this morning. Now some words of benediction. Before we take the spirit of this morning into the rest of the week, let me make note once again of how challenging it is to be unable to gather together as a community. When George was in absolute isolation in the end, he said, "There is no point to anything if people are extinct." But in the coming weeks and months, knowing we are not extinct, we will work on ways wherein we can be together in small groups and walk and talk and offer the kind of recognition and concern and balance and growth that we built our community for in the first place. Do not despair. Learn and connect. Connect and learn. If there were no other lesson to learn from isolation, learning how important we are to one another would be enough. And if we have to build a new world, remember, we can, and we will. Have a great week.
And now, as our service ends with a breath, we pass the flame of our chalice lamp to each other as we say our closing words together. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of courage. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world.
This is a song by Holly Near. I am before us, so lift me up to the light of change. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. There is a hurting in my family, and there is sorrow in my town. There is a panic all across the nation, and there is wailing the whole world round. But I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. May the children see more clearly, and may the elders be more wise. May the winds of change caress us, even though they burn our eyes. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. Give me a mighty oak to hold my confusion. Give me a desert to hold my fear. Give me a sunset to hold my wonder. Give me an ocean to hold my tears. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. So lift me up to the light of change.